Hello and welcome to CodeBugs. I am Shashank Ravichandran and we will be finding the solution to this problem. But before we get on, let me tell you about our channel. CodeBugs is committed to help computer science students in their journey to become professionals that companies love to hire. We provide detailed solutions to problems, fix your errors, as well as provide complete tutorials on various computer science concepts. Now, getting back to the video, the problem statement reads, for any given input string that contains a mixture of alphabets and numbers, the code that we write should print out the given pattern as the output. Let us break down the logic by looking at the example outputs given. The last line in the output is just the sequence of alphabets that are there in the input string. This implies that the first step in our logic would be to separate the alphabets from the numbers in the input string. Now observe the beginning of each line. Line 1 starts with the first alphabet in the input string. Line 2 starts with the first two alphabets. Line 3 starts with the first three alphabets in the input string, and so on. This goes on until the line contains only alphabets. This makes up the second point of our logic. The nth line starts with the first n alphabets in the input string, where n varies between 1 and the total number of alphabets in the input string. This is because as n is equal to the number of alphabets in the input string, the line will only contain alphabets, which is at termination criteria. Also observe that the number of characters in each line is a constant, which is 6 in the case of this example. Now what is the number of alphabets in the input string? 6 as well. So this makes up the third point in our logic. Each line can contain only a fixed number of characters, let us say s, where s is equal to the number of alphabets in the input string. Now for the last part. It might seem a bit tricky to find the pattern behind how numbers are displayed in each line, but everything becomes clear if you pick out only the numbers and write them out in a straight line. The numbers that are there in the input string are just repeated over and over again. This repetition independent of the line number. Let us understand this more clearly by using the example given. Line number 1 starts with the alphabet M, followed by the repetition of the numbers given in the input string, which are 362, 36, and the next character in this line should have been 2, following the pattern that we have observed. But since the line can contain only a fixed number of characters, which is 6 in this case, this 2 is carried over to the next line and occupies the third position in line number 2. So this makes up the fourth and final part of our logic for this question, which is line number independent repetition of the numbers in the input string. Let us now start implementing this logic in Python. Let us first get the input string from the user using the input function. A good coding practice here is to use the strip function to delete any leading or trailing white spaces. Let us now create empty lists to store the numbers and alphabets extracted from the input string separately. To separate the alphabets from the numbers, let us iterate over every character in the input string and check if the character is an alphabet using the isAlpha function. If it is an alphabet, let us append it to the alphabets list. Else, we know that it should be a number, so appending it to the numbers list. Let n be equal to the length of the alphabets list. To print the expected output, an outer loop which controls the number of lines to be printed, and an inner loop which actually prints the characters in each of those lines. Since the number of lines to be printed is equal to the number of alphabets in the input string, the outer loop variable varies from 0 to n-1, hence for I in range of n. So now according to the second point of our logic, the nth line will start with the first n alphabets in the input string. So let us now slice out the first n alphabets from the alphabets list and print it out. Let us also add end equal to empty string here so that the print function doesn't add the new line character by default at the end of the line. Now the inner loop varies from 0 to n minus 1 initially but would decrease by 1 with each line. So the inner loop will be for j in range of n minus 1 minus I. Referring to point 4 of our logic, the repetition cycle of the numbers in the input string are independent of the line numbers. Hence, the variable which tracks the repetition cycle should be independent of the loop variables of both the outer loop as well as the inner loop. So let us create a variable which keeps track of this repetition cycle. Let's name it tracker and initially it should be 0. Now the inner loop ensures that each of the position unoccupied by a alphabet in each of the line is filled with a number. So printing numbers of tracker inside the inner loop and incrementing tracker for every iteration of the inner loop. So let us add a conditional statement to the inner loop where if the tracker is equal to the length of the numbers list, the tracker is reset to 0. We'll add a print statement with an empty string outside the inner loop such that the cursor moves to the next line after the inner loop is executed. We are done with the code and we should get the expected output. Now running the program and giving the example input as the input string here. And yes, we are getting the expected output. I hope this video was helpful. Do like, share and subscribe to CodeBugs for more such content.